Tariq, if you do this shit, you can never go back.
So one of the most common themes we've seen across Power is where characters live this double life and eventually want out of the game. And this is what we saw Ghost go through. He was living this double life and realized he wanted out of the game because you either end up dead or in jail. And now so is Tariq because he's seen the consequences and he's realized early. So this video will be centered around Tariq and Ghost, how Ghost was right and Tariq is slowly beginning to regret some of his decisions, and whether or not Tariq will see Ghost in a hallucination in Season 3, and if he does, how and why. But regardless of whether he does or doesn't, it does have to be said, Tariq is learning more about his father now that he's dead than when he was alive, and what he put in place with his will, having Tariq go college and having a backup plan for Yasmin. I really do wonder what other tricks Ghost has up his sleeve, and whether or not there are any more trigger points in his will, which will come to the forefront in Season 3, 4 or 5, based on Tariq's actions, because Ghost really did think of everything, and this even took Tariq by surprise. This was a look of how did my father think of all of this before he died? And I think there was a sense of confusion, being impressed and surprised with how his father thought of almost everything, but also him realizing how Ghost was right all along. And I do think Tariq will regret killing his father later on, if he doesn't already, because he's done a complete U-turn. He now wants out of the game, and we saw a lot of clues to suggest he's done with his life already. But to set the foundation for this video, we need to rewind it back to Power.
What do you want from me, boy? Teach me your motherfucking game, Ghost.
So how exactly did Tariq go from wanting to be a hustler and becoming his own man, learning the game from Kanan and telling Ghost to teach him the motherfucking game, to now this?
Once I get that money, you could do whatever the fuck you want to do in Mecca. And I'm gonna be out of this game completely. Let's see.
So Tariq has done a complete U-turn from wanting to learn the game and being a drug dealer to now trying to come up with an exit strategy and leaving the game, something Ghost tried to keep Tariq away from. And the reason why Ghost wanted to keep Tariq away from the streets was because he knew what he had to go through to get where he was. Although it can be said, he also had a path away from the game, because he also could have gone to Chode, but he chose to stay because he couldn't leave Tommy. But Ghost eventually built something and laid the foundations for Tariq, so he didn't have to go through what he did. So Tariq really did have everything Ghost had, the intelligence, the smarts, and he also had the added privilege of growing up away from the streets and the game. And Tariq could have been anything he wanted to be.
My father tried to get me to turn my back on the streets. I didn't listen. Okay, I'm trying to protect you, man. I'm trying to protect you from a life of misery, son.
But in Power, Tariq grew up to resent his father for all his lies about his past, putting his hands on his mother Tasha, his relationship with Angela, and him being a drug-dealing murderer. But ironically, this is exactly what Tariq wants to become out of choice, which he definitely has some regrets over now, which we're going to come to in just a moment. But as much as he denied being anything like Ghost, and how much he wanted to be the opposite, in reality he wanted to become exactly what his father was, and become a reflection of Ghost. Hence why when Tommy came to New York in Power Book 2 Ghost Season 1, Tariq said hopefully next time when we meet again, I'll be worthy of my father's name. This was really him accepting who he was and who he wanted to become. He even said it himself, he's learning more about his father now that he's dead, and he's the manifestation of what he could never be. But over the course of the 2 seasons in Power Book 2 Ghost, we've seen certain events play out where Tariq's questioned himself, does he want this double life? And he's living the exact same double life Ghost did, which Effie understands and which Brayden loves, but I don't think either of them have suffered the loss Tariq has. But we are yet to know about Effie's past, so that's something just to keep in the back of our minds, because I'm sure we learn more about Effie in Season 3. But where Tariq found this sense of normality in his relationship with Lauren, just like Ghost did with Angela, he realized what happens to everybody who gets close to him. They either end up dead or in jail, and it was the same case for Lauren. So we saw the dream sequence Tariq had with all of those he had some sort of hand in killing, and where some deserved their deaths, like Ray Ray, many of these deaths he had some sort of regret over. There was Lakeisha, Proctor, his professors, and there was also Kanan, who showed up a few times as a hallucination scene, because Kanan was his best friend, and he still feels some guilt over having set up Kanan. But he was forced into this plan by Tasha, because it was either Kanan or his mom, and he was always gonna pick Tasha. But all of these characters Tariq definitely felt some guilt over, and when he saw Lauren, we already knew what her fate was gonna be. He was just trying to stop her from going inside and joining the dead, but it was too late. Time was definitely ticking. There was also Grandma Estelle, who laid out some home truths, how he was responsible for why the St. Patricks were now broken. He killed Ghost, he was largely responsible for Rayna's death. He sent Tasha away to Witsec took custody of Yasmin away from Grandma Estelle, only for himself to end up in jail moments later. And this was the moment he probably knew enough was enough and he had to find a way out of the game after he was locked up. Now, he also saw the hallucination of Kanan, who told him it's always the people closest to him, meaning Lauren had some involvement and he wasn't seeing the chessboard clearly. But he also got the letter from Ghost to tell him he knew he'd always end up here, exactly where he belongs. But Effie telling Tariq his story isn't over is what will drive him to push him to prove his father wrong. So does Tariq have what it takes to win? And I'm gonna come back around to this phone call in just a moment. But when he came out of jail, he was fuming with Brayden letting Kane get so close to him. And he also told him how this game is so unforgiving. And we saw it in Tariq's eyes how jail was the last place he wanted to be. So we saw him blackmailing Mecca for 2 million and telling Monet once he gets his money, that's him done and he's out of the game. And he even told Brayden he's done. He doesn't even want to be in the game anymore. And when he learned about Drew and Diana stealing the product from him, he didn't even care because he had his own exit plan. Course Correct was also blown up in court through Brayden, and Tariq didn't even care because there were bigger things at stake like taking care of his sister Yasmin. But although Tariq's plan was to get the 2 million and leave the game, Monet definitely thought I don't think so, because even though she said he can leave the game if he helps her kill Mecca, she knows Tariq is the Tejada family business, and without Tariq, the Tejadas really are nothing. And Tariq really did make her realize she needs him when he had one of his own ghost moments, telling her she thinks she's in control, but each of her kids were going behind her back. And what Tariq told her in season 1 was definitely true. He's the only one she can trust. But let's not get it twisted. It's not Tariq who needs the Tejadas. They need him more than he needs them. And I can definitely see him coming out from under the Tejadas, because the Tejada family will definitely self-implode on their own accord because of their own internal issues. But we all know the Tejadas won't let Tariq just walk away. Davis McLean even said it in this scene. So let's see what Tariq's next move is. But sticking with Davis McLean for a moment and Tariq's exit plan, I do wonder if Tariq will ever consider this.
You know what, kid? You might make a decent lawyer someday.
So this was McLean telling him he'd make a great lawyer one day, and if his plan is to exit the game, I really do wonder what avenue Tariq will go down, because where Ghost had the clubs, I really don't see Tariq quite following his father's footsteps, because the deal is already in place with Simon Stern for the clubs. But I do wonder if he could actually become a lawyer or end up on Wall Street like Brayden, because Tariq is smart, and he can definitely be whatever he wants to be if he puts his mind to it. But I do think he will end up meeting his fate at some point in the future. And I think this would be the perfect moment to have a hallucination scene of his father, or this phone call that we saw, if and when he regrets killing him, and if he's gone legit, because he'll finally understand why Ghost was so adamant about keeping him away from the game. Because at the end of the day, Ghost gave him all the advantages he never had, and whether Tariq realizes before it's too late or suffers the same fate, let's wait and see. Because it really would be quite poetic to see when Tariq does meet his fate, that's the moment he sees Ghost or has this conversation with his father to tell him he was right and he should have listened to him. So with that being said, drop all your thoughts down below in the comment section on how Tariq is slowly coming to the realization he needs to leave the game. And will he succeed? That's the big question. Because just like he said to Ghost, when are you gonna pay for all that you've done? We need to ask the question, is Tariq gonna pay for what he's done? So drop all your thoughts down below on how Ghost was right, and will Tariq live to regret killing his father?